all of that mean for Black communities? It means that it is time to accelerate, not back away from our push for criminal justice reform. First, it means Black communities must ensure that President-elect Biden and his administration correct the racist effects of the 1994 crime bill that he shares responsibility for enacting. As he steps into the White House, President-elect Joe Biden has a deep responsibility to reduce mass incarceration that his earlier policies helped to accelerate. His first step should be to publicly support and to work with legislative leaders to pass the BREATHE Act to bring meaningful structural change to American policing. Second, it means Black communities must engage Vice President-elect Kamala Harris in a robust change-making conversation. I know folks are excited, but let's just remember that as Vice President, Harris has very little official power, unless, of course, we end up with a tied Senate. But as America's first woman of color VP, she has an extraordinary platform. We need to urge the Biden administration to empower Harris with a substantive, anti-racist criminal justice policy portfolio. Vice President-elect Harris has a unique opportunity as a former prosecutor to make a compelling case about why we need to make change in our system. By stepping up to articulate an uncompromising commitment to racial and criminal justice, she may find a way to make the largely symbolic office of the vice presidency into a meaningful site for reform. Number 3, even as we fight for national change, we need to stay focused on local and state policy. In a presidential election year, I get it, it's easy to focus primarily on national politics and policy, but we have to remember that policing is primarily local. Cities and counties, chiefs and sheriffs, district attorneys and state legislatures, they're the ones in charge of the overwhelming number of laws and processes that shape the terrain of American criminal punishment. More than 3/4 of inmates are incarcerated in state, not federal prison. And this means Black people must pressure, push, and change local and state leadership. We have to create an agenda for Congress and the new presidential administration, and we have to push those who are much closer to home. Number 4, we need to take on police unions. In the past decade, police unions have become one of the most difficult barriers to meaningful reform. Rather than simply fighting to ensure safe working conditions and fair pay for their members, police unions have aggressively backed officers accused of misconduct. They've used their resources to denounce reform-minded elected leaders and actively have spread misinformation about public safety. Indeed, in many instances, the leadership and public positions of police unions undermine rather than support the views of the diverse line officers in their ranks. Any effective agenda for criminal justice reform must openly and courageously refute unfair practices by unions. And number 5, finally, Black communities must continue to talk about our experiences. We have to listen to one another and to seek sustainable, community-based solutions to the challenges in our communities. As I said last night, not all Black people think alike. Not all Black people have the same experiences. We are a richly varied people, informed not only by our shared traumas, but by the deep wells of our reasoning and our imagination for freedom and fairness. The work of criminal justice reform will require listening to our elders as they remind us of collaborative institutions that thrived in our communities. It will require listening to vulnerable and to the victims as we seek to understand what actually makes them feel safe and free in our homes and in our neighborhoods. It will require listening to the formerly incarcerated and the currently incarcerated to understand the effects of violent institutions and the need for effective rejoining of our communities. There are no simple or swift solutions, but Black people must engage one another as we seek greater justice. And now for today's call to action. Text NEWS to 55156 and join color of change in order to ensure that elected officials prioritize meaningful criminal justice reform. Every night I have asked you to do another thing, and I will ask you again tonight. I ask you to remember. And tonight, I will ask you to remember the Black people who have been killed by police in 2020. Remember William Howard Green, 43, killed by Prince George's, Maryland police on January 27, 2020, while sitting handcuffed in the front seat of a police cruiser. Remember Breonna Taylor, 26, killed by Louisville, Kentucky police on March 13th, 2020, while sleeping in her own bed. Remember Daniel Prude, 41, killed by Rochester police on March 30th, 2020, after visiting his brother and experiencing a mental health crisis. Remember Desmond Franklin, 22, killed by an off-duty Cleveland, Ohio police officer on April 29th while driving. Remember George Floyd, 46, killed by Minneapolis, Minnesota police on May 25th, 2020 while shopping for food. Remember Rayshard Brooks, 27, killed by Atlanta, Georgia police on June 12th, 2020 while sleeping in a car. Remember Roxanne Moore, 29, a Black trans woman who was killed by Reading, Pennsylvania police on September 13th, 2020 after being in a distressed state of a mental health crisis. Remember Jonathan Price, 31, killed by Wolf City, Texas police on October 3rd, 2020 while he was just trying to break up a fight. Remember Walter Wallace Jr., 27, killed by Philadelphia police on October 26, 2020 after his brother requested care, requested help for his mental health crisis.